Welcome to the Canes Insight Daily Podcast powered by Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. One of the best weekends that a Miami fan could ever hope for. Of course, the blowout, dominant, humiliating victory for the Canes at the Swamp on Saturday. And then yesterday, the Florida State Seminoles fall to 0-2 with a beatdown at home against Boston College. We will jump into that game. Also continue to analyze the Miami victory with a little more depth, a little more film insight from Stevo. You know him from 365 Canes football, the great breakdowns. He trains a bunch of these players, so he knows their games intimately, and he's great at breaking down the film, which he does with us. First, I want to talk to some folks that know how to break down your case. That is Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anijar and Levine. Pete, hop in. I'll be the last Pete hop in, at least in the studio for a bit. Pete's going to go to Italy. We're going to still keep him on the show. I know I don't want people texting me about Pete not being on. I need you on the show a little bit, Pete, but you're going to be in Italy wearing soccer jerseys, eating margarita pizza and living the life in between shows.
Yeah, excited for it. Obviously be still keeping up with everything Canes related and be still running the social media and all that. So I'll still be in tune with what's going on.
Now, somebody probably wishes they were in Italy right now, although I take it back because last time they were in Europe, they lost the game. So I'll take that one back. The Florida State Seminoles, losers on two continents here, 0-2, 28-13 to Boston College. And Pete, this is not something that came out of the blue. This is something that has been building really in successive off seasons.
Yeah, and look, we'll have a discussion about the talent level that's there, and there was a lot of hype about certain positions there, the defensive line, the defensive back room, and that just hasn't come to fruition for them on the field. But just talking to some people, NFL people, over the course of the last 12 hours or so here, there's a sense that the culture is obviously not where it needs to be. Referencing the opt-outs in the bowl game last year, obviously just didn't have much respect for what they had going on in that season after not making the playoffs. And then you look at some of the stuff that happened this offseason with some of their top players, some of their supposed leaders entering the portal or threatening to enter the portal, and then NIL negotiations took over and they ended up staying. But I think we talk about the talent, but you're in year 5 now of Mike Norvell, and there doesn't seem to be a real foundation. There's going to be a lot of talk about DJU. The NFL people I talked to say, look, this is not all on him, right? That offensive line is awful. These other guys that we've talked about haven't done what we expected them to do. But the culture and the foundation does not seem to be solid up there in Tallahassee right now.
Yeah, I think you see that with their talented players, right? The defensive line has talent. Those guys have NFL bodies. Those are the guys NFL players or NFL people are watching, and then NFL people are disappointed in because they're underachieving. And I think that's where you see the culture. Those are the guys that opted out that threatened to hop in the portal, extorted FSU for more money, and then came back. Those are the guys underachieving right now on that defensive line. Beyond the defensive line, and maybe let's say the defensive backfield, there's no good players, man. The offense has, in my opinion, no good players. I mean, zero good players on offense. If I'm missing somebody, tell me. I mean, the running backs are decent, I guess. But you're talking about actual good players, they don't have it. And if you look at their recruiting rankings, 2021, number 23, 2022, number 20, 2023, number 19, 2024, number 12. And those last two were off good seasons. They should have had better classes. So when you recruit like that in high school, and then, if you're a bad recruiter in high school, you're a bad recruiter in the portal. They hit on a lot of guys in a couple off seasons, but this portal class looks like a bunch of duds. They didn't get the Cam Wars. They didn't get the Damian Martinez's. They didn't get the kind of premium type of targets that Miami was able to land in the portal beyond high school recruiting, which they also struggled at. And I think you're seeing that kind of roster on the field. And Pete, we came on here in spring and we talked about UF and FSU spring game. We've noticed some problems with UF, which we saw on Saturday, but my take watching those two spring games back then, I think you agreed at the time, The UF actually was better than FSU in the spring game, and we saw how bad UF was when they played Miami. So if you don't mind, Pete, pull up this video from about 4 months ago, right after the FSU spring game, where we pointed out some of the holes on the roster. To me, I took up some big picture notes and some specific notes. We'll get into both. The big picture note I took on FSU, there are two real ones that jumped out to me. Number one, compressed pockets. It seemed to me that their offensive line lacks a little bit of power. I don't think they have the size and mass and just overall NFL talent of Miami's offensive line, for example. So you saw a lot of compressed pockets where Florida State's defensive line, even if they didn't get a sack, they're able to really squeeze DJ. And DJ's big and strong and tall. He could stand in there and throw, but he seemed a little out of sorts. And he's not the most athletic guy. So he was pushed off his spot a little bit within that compressed pocket. He was throwing some inaccurate balls. And the big note I had was, where are the matchup problems? You look at Florida State last year. Jordan Travis was a matchup problem with his legs. If he was able to get on the edge on you, put you in conflict because he could run and throw, he caused a lot of problems in that way. Plus, he could make the offensive coordinator right, make up for some offensive line mistakes with his ability to elude when that's not necessarily the play call. So that was one thing in terms of a matchup problem. Trey Benson, 222 pounds, 4.3 speed. You lose that ability. Receiver, you had Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, two of the biggest, probably the two best big receivers in the ACC, as good as any in the country. And those two guys made a ton of contested catches. They were matchup problems. We saw that against Miami. We see that pretty much every game FSU played. Didn't see that anywhere on the spring game. Any matchup problem like that. Jaheim Bell, tight end / fullback, similar to some of the guys that Miami has on the roster now. He didn't do much at all. Or sorry, they didn't replace him at all. So now you had a guy who was a matchup problem against safeties and linebackers, too fast for linebackers, too big for safeties. He's out of the picture. You lose Jared Verse, who first-round defensive end, Braden Fisk, second-round defensive tackle. And again, these are guys that created problems for you, and they're not necessarily getting replaced by equivalent players. Also, Renardo Green, a defensive back, he'll probably be a day 2 pick, although I think they're doing well at that position, which we'll talk about later. So overall, I think when you watch Florida State in the past, you said, how are we going to deal with Travis's running? How are we going to deal with these big receivers? How are we going to deal with these defensive linemen? How are we going to deal with Jaheim Bell? How are we going to stop Trey Benson from making a big run against us? I don't see replacements stepping up at any of those positions that give you the same type of matchup concerns.
Well, D, how about the upgraded background? How much better does it look now?
I know, and the haircuts, we look a lot better. We got a little tan too. Listen, I don't think anything's changed from those statements. I thought that was pretty accurate. I know that clip was me because I talked for a while, but you said the same things. The offensive line is small. It lacks talent. It lacks knockback. I never understood why people were saying this FSU offensive line is one of the best in the country. They stink. They don't have NFL talent. They're just not talent. They're not big and strong. We talked about how UF had a knockback operation against UF, consistently knocking them back. It's the opposite with FSU. Against a BC front that is not world beaters, they were constantly going backwards, condensing the pocket against DJ. So DJ was either getting hit or he didn't have room to throw. And when you have an unathletic quarterback that's not very accurate to begin with, all that condensed space makes him extremely inaccurate.
Yeah. And look, I said, I think in that podcast that I thought Mike Norvell was going to be able to mask a lot of stuff with that team, because I do think he's a very good play caller. He's shown that throughout his career. But again, this goes back to the foundation that's been built there. And it's got to be pretty scary for Noles fans, because you start the year 0-2 now. You're almost essentially out of the ACC contention, out of the ACC race there. And it's like, if that foundation is not strong and you've already started 0-2, is this team going to start to quit? That's where I'd be worried if I was an FSU fan.
Yeah, and look, we talked about when I did that little monologue there, we were talking a lot about the offensive holes. I think, again, we've seen those. The receivers are awful. Malik Benson, Jaylen Brown, straight line burners, absolutely no quickness. They're stiff as boards. They don't have very good hands. They're not very tough. They don't bring anything to the table unless they're going deep. And FSU has not been able to hit on deep balls. I think that'll come at times during the season, but it's not a consistent go-to thing like a Restrepo, where you know he's going to get open, you're going to get him the ball, and he can do something after the catch. So that's weak. The tight ends, might as well be walk-ons. I mean, horrible. Running backs, average. So all that's there. The one thing I noticed when I went back and listened to that was we talked about the defensive losses, right? Jared Verse, Brandon Fisk. Now, on paper, that was not as much of a drop-off because they still had NFL talent on the line. You heard all the talk before the season about all the NFL scouts watching the Darrell Jacksons, the Josh Farmers, the Patrick Paytons, Marvin Jones. I think what the defensive line is missing, and you got into this right off the top, Pete, from your NFL sources, this defensive line lacks character and toughness.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that someone I spoke to said is that these guys, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, had something to prove, and that's how they played. Not that these guys that Florida State has doesn't. They do have something to prove. Obviously, Darrell Jackson missed all of last season. Marvin Jones coming over as a transfer, Patrick Payton coming back with a lot of people projecting him as a top 100 type pick. So they did have a lot to prove, but it just doesn't seem like the want to is there the same way it was from these other guys coming over from, and that's the point he made. These guys came over from smaller schools with something to prove. That's the difference, right? So they really wanted to show themselves at this level. Obviously, they did that. They're in the NFL now and had a great season for Florida State. But I think when you talk about D-line, it's body types are important, and they do have those. But there's more to it than that.
It's a great point, Peter, and I want to jump on that because we're always trying to learn. How do we get better at figuring out how to use the portal, how to evaluate high school players, how to evaluate portal players? And I think when you look at the portal players Miami brought in, right, for the most part, whether it's Cam Ward, Damian Martinez, Elijah Alston, Keem Messidor, Simeon Barrow, guys like that, Francisco Mount Noah, they were not big recruits, right? And then they developed into very good college players, but they still had that mentality of we weren't never given the 5-star. They continued to have something to prove. These guys that FSU is getting are 5 stars elsewhere that just were bust. And sometimes those guys that were bust for a reason. And they just didn't have it mentally. Now, I think you can get away with that more at quarterback. For example, Bo Nix, right? Or Jaden Daniels. Now, I understand that DJU technically fits that profile. He just doesn't have the talent. It is what it is. You could probably find talented quarterbacks that have a chip on their shoulder. They were 5 stars. It didn't work out for whatever reason, but they're hard workers and they want to show you. I'm fine playing in that sandbox. But in terms of the 5-star position players, 4-star position players that went bust, I would be very, very careful because a lot of times those guys fail because they do not have it between the ears. And I'd much rather focus on the guys that went to a small school and emerged and still want to prove that they can do it on the big stage because, like you said, they have something to prove. And we saw that on Saturday with the Canes, and we saw that on Monday with Florida State. Just 2 different approaches having 2 different sets of results.
Yeah, and look, when it comes to those small school guys, as long as they have the physicals, if they have the height, weight, speed, and they've been productive, I think that you should continue to target those guys because it's on tape what they've done. And again, like you said, the chip on their shoulder, without a doubt.
Yeah, and look, Pete, pull up the tweet here. One big factor, going back to the recruiting side of things, where you saw the Norvell struggle mightily. Their collective is just not as good as Miami's. Florida's collective is not as good as Miami's. And that has a clear result on the team. Oh, here we go. Look at this. We got any lawyers in here, lawsuit to recoup NIL funds. They're already trying to sue FSU for gross negligence, embezzlement with contributed funds. And they're being serious. So, yeah, I mean, these fans are getting restless. And, actually, pull up plus more of these tiers. Let's just, before we move on to Miami's NIL, I want to focus on these guys and drop the elbow on them a little bit.
This was so telling. And again, we're talking about the line of scrimmages for Florida State coming into the season as being a perceived strength of the team. Boston College, let me tell you, Boston College might not be too bad moving forward with Bill O'Brien as head coach. 263 yards on the ground for BC, 21 for Florida State. I don't think that if someone told you that before the season, they would have believed you. And then Florida State really spent their entire offseason complaining and suing and forgot to practice any football.
Yeah, it seems like that. Not, too much focus on the wrong things. I think that's a fair thing. Every coach talks about distractions. What did you hear about this season for FSU? I mean, you heard nothing. You heard about the playoff. You heard about the ACC. You heard about paying their own players to come back. I mean, none of it was, hey, let's win next year.
And let's build on what we did.
You just didn't hear it. You didn't feel it. So the offseason tenor was very different. But now getting back to Miami's NIL, Pete, Canes connection. We preach it all the time. When you look at Miami's roster, you look at Florida's roster, you look at FSU's roster. This is not a coincidence. Point of the tweet here by Darren Heidner, who's an NIL attorney, not a Hurricane grad. I believe he's actually a Gator grad, right?
Yeah, big Gator guy.
You could read it better than me, Pete. Read that tweet if you don't mind.
So he said, it's no secret that Canes Connection is one of the best run NIL collectives. Zach Burr and crew are putting on a clinic. And that was him quote tweeting a Dennis Dodd tweet talking about Miami and Mario Cristobal's, rebuilding process and how, Cam Ward was the center of that. But it's funny. I think in the comments here, a Gator fan says, curious why you're not helping UF run this vision. And Darren says they don't want my help. So they've got it figured out up there in Gainesville.
Yeah. I mean, so look, Gator fans are upset that their NIL money is not being spent effectively. It's not enough. Florida State fans are trying to sue their own NIL program.
And we're 1 week in.
But I think the lesson from a Miami fan standpoint is if you invest your hard-earned money in Canes Connection, the result is going to be better players on the field. And that clearly makes a difference in the quality of team. You saw it this weekend in the most stark manner possible. The difference in roster, the difference in NIL collective, the difference in head coach recruiting. This money is going to be spent well. So please, if you want to invest in something related to Canes football, it's your hard-earned money. There's a lot of things you got to spend it on. But if you're spending it on Canes football, canesconnection.com/CIS, you are investing in the product on the field, and you are having a direct result in wins and losses and games like Saturday. Everybody in Canes Connection is a part of what happened on Saturday, and everybody who joins Canes Connection is going to be a part of what happens in the games to come. That's just the reality. It's not fluff. That's the truth. You saw it. You're seeing it. Just look around. Listen to people that are not affiliated with you and talk about it. canesconnection.com/CIS. Links in our description. Links on the website. First month, $1. You get access to a private Zoom call with me that I do regularly, giving you the absolute latest direct inside info from the team, because obviously everybody's on board with Canes Connection members getting good quality for it and being brought in tight to this program on the inside as opposed to the outside. canesconnection.com/CIS. Now we're going to switch gears from an 0-2 team to a team that is 1-0 and is the talk of the town, which is the Miami Hurricanes. I'm going to bring in Stevo from 365 Canes football. He is one of the best receiver trainers in the area, trains with Restrepo, trains with Jacoby George, knows all these guys, has worked with them. He's also very good at film breakdowns. You can see some on his channel, which will promote 365 Canes info, 365 Canes football, 365 Canes. It'll pop up. But those are his video breakdowns of the team. He went and looked at the Florida game in depth, the scheme, the personnel, the technique, all the little details. He breaks it down. He's joined us to break it down first. But before we talk to Stevo, want to talk about the Miami Hurricane team store, MiamiHTS.com. It is on fire right now. Look at that Lefebvre collection, that old gear, which is awesome. Coolest designs. You got the Miami Maniac right there. That old school Miami Hurricanes hat. I used to have one of those in my dad's closet when I was a kid with that print. Is bringing back fond memories, but you can bring it back here with the Lefebvre connection. Just really, really cool stuff, really unique products here. And it's all part of the UM athletic department. So you support this Miami Hurricane team store, you support the athletic department. Again, more money flowing into the school. You get great product in return. They get money that gets spent on making this team better and making this program better. So everybody wins. If you want to go in person, store right next to the Thesis Hotel on South Dixie Highway across the street from Miami. This is the old All Canes. It has moved across the street and upgraded significantly. Harry Rothwell and the boys take care of you. MiamiHTS.com. All right. So P, why don't you kick it? Because you're gonna be gone for a while, at least in studio. So why don't you kick it to Stevo here?
Stevo coming on here with the breakdown real quick. I wanted to just remind people the Won't Back Down tee to commemorate that win yesterday, available on the CanesInSight Shopify. People have been loving that one. So go and grab it. They were playing Tom Petty last night on the broadcast too in the Florida State game. So obviously can continue and keep that good feeling coming when that song plays for Miami fans. But again, Stevo 365 Canes football, joining us next here on the Canes Insight Daily Podcast.
Go Canes. All right, now that we've had a few days to digest the highlights, the quotes, all that, had to dig deep into the film, and nobody does that better than my man Stevo. Stevo 365 Canes football, 365 Canes info. We got a lot of places where you can find his videos. Did a comprehensive video breakdown on this game. Watched it very close. He's trained a lot of these athletes himself, very familiar with the players, their talents, and of course knows the game inside and out. So nobody better to break down Canes football. Can also catch him on Wednesday, 3 live Canes every single Wednesday. My man Steve, how you doing?
Doing great. You can't ever not be doing great after a blowout win on the road. I caught D Money up there, and they put all of us in the nosebleed, so we were up there together. But we were celebrating together. It was very nice. And just utter complete domination. When you hear about something all off season and then you see it happen, we see it in practice, but then you see it on game day. It really hits different. A lot of Canes fans, even the national media are quick to say we're back. You know how they do it. They're throwing that on us, but I ain't even telling them to stop no more. I'm on the train. It's my favorite color Kool-Aid I'm drinking. And it's orange today. It's orange this year. Cause we're doing well.
Yeah. Look, you always represent the Broward athletes. You were one yourself. Your brother right now is representing for St. Thomas. And of course, you've worked with a lot of these guys, Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, ton of others on their footwork, their routes, everything else. And I saw the signature dread, the signature light color dread, saw that from across the stadium, walked over, said what's up, and asked you prediction before the game. How many Broward guys are going to score? You told me 3. Mark Fletcher, Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo. Sure enough, 2 touchdowns for Fletcher, touchdown for Restrepo, touchdown for George. So you Nostradamus on that one. We all saw the film. We all seen the highlights, but we haven't dug deep. What's something that when you rewatch and really dug in that jumped out to you?
The penetration from our second team D tackles. I mean, I was blown away with Ahmad Moten. We talked about it a little bit before we went on air. The second team D tackles, man, they were Anthony Campbell, a guy that, looked the part. Obviously that play that Graham Mertz got hurt, that interception with Mish over the top. Anthony Campbell and Tyler Barron met him at the court. Met each other at the quarterback. I mean, the penetration from our second team D tackles. Once the hype dies down, you start just looking for any pluses here to go. I mean, man, Moten and Campbell, hats off to them because they were in the backfield. They were in the backfield. That's something that really popped out to me. Second, third time watching, you just see 99 flashing, and then they try to double team. There's a couple times where, Kiko got a sack, Kiko had a TFL, Wesley had a TFL, and it's really because Anthony Campbell has that center and guard in no man's land. They're not pushing him away. They're not making any ground. They're not washing him down. So there's just a gap unaccounted for that Kiko could just shoot right through. So kudos to the defensive line. And I just want to say it, man. A lot of people were worried about our secondary, man. I just want to give Jaden Harris a clap, because he played extremely well, man. He played technique football. His catch technique was great. His blitzing, I never seen him really blitz last year. Off the edge, he made 3 plays that he's not going to get a stat sheet for counted for. But there was that big sack that when Graham Mertz stepped up and Austin, knocked him down. That was Jaden Harris coming off the edge, beating a tackle one-on-one. I mean, come on, bro. I love the way that secondary played. I love a lot of things. Third-year players, we talk about it all the time. Horton, all these guys, they're balling.
Yeah, I want to get on that one. So you're obviously you coach receivers, so the science of it, the nuances of the position. Isaiah Horton's someone that we've talked about on this podcast a lot. You talked about a lot since before this season as someone who's made a huge leap, just a worker, someone with a lot of physical tools, but he's maximizing those. Reminded me a little bit of KJ Osborne. Maybe it's just the number 2, but as someone who's just getting stronger and more physical and more explosive and really just more everything, the more time goes on because of the way he works. What have you seen from Isaiah Horton in this game and in general?
I mean, he works out with Pete from Receiver Factory and then Tight End U. You see JoJo over there. There's some of the best trainers down there. He's one of the best trainers, down here. he's had Isaiah Horton, from a while ago, from when he first got in, and you see every offseason he's a little quicker, he's a little bit more sudden. He's always had great hands and a great frame. Obviously he's put more muscle on in the program, but he's unlocked everything. He's a complete receiver now. He can go vertical. He could go vertical already. You saw it versus Texas A&M. He's a big strider. He can go vertical. But the quickness in his game, his releases, his timing, his tempo of his routes, everything is, people just think, oh, my God, he's just open Cam Ward stone him. The tempo of that stem, where he's at, is giving him yards. There's a cover three. There's that corner is going to be meeting you there if you're running a post. So understanding which route you're going to. So he's slowing down in the middle, and Cam Ward, being a senior himself, putting that ball high and up so he doesn't run into him. But that's Horton's route running on full display. He's not burning it full speed. He already did his burst to get past the linebacker. Now he's slowing down. Stuff like that, if you don't really see, but it's so incredible and so critical to the position. So I'm super happy for Horton. He's definitely a hard worker, and this is by no mistake why this is happening for him. I thought he probably had the strongest game outside of X at receiver. It probably is easy to say that. I know Jacoby had the big splash play, but I think he's definitely earned that to be probably the second best wideout from this game, at least this game. So super happy for him. He's put in the work. When you see these guys training, you could talk to the trainers like X and Jacoby, work with Gold Feet for a while. That's how I was able to get with those guys, and you see their work ethic. You see, Horton's work ethic. I think he's like an old school Cane. He's a guy who, if he drops a ball, he'll probably catch 100 after practice. He was already going to catch extra, but he'll catch even more because it just eats away at his mind.
Yeah, we talked about how wide receiver is really a work ethic position, right? Because you can't, if you're a lineman, you can practice on your own, but it's a little hard without the contact element. Whereas running routes and catching the ball, you can really do that. You can run the routes on your own, of course. Catching the ball, you just need someone throwing it to you, but that's something you can practice on your own when no one's watching and when the coaches aren't on the clock. So glad to see these guys with the work ethic. Obviously, we're seeing the results. Before we move off Horton, because he's a very interesting player to me, let's assume, please, injury-free, everything as it should be. When he's done at Miami and he's moving on, what do you see the finished product looking like? Do you see an NFL player? What do you see him bringing to the table?
Yeah, he's for sure an NFL player, in my opinion. He screams, his body, his basically his game itself screams NFL. Smart, he can play special teams. He's been playing good special teams while he's been here. A lot of people, I don't know, it goes under the radar. When you're blocking on punt return, people aren't going to be like, oh my God, he's doing so good. Man, he had like 2 or 3, seal blocks on punt return that, no one's going to go over there and throw it. But NFL scouts look at that. A lot of NFL guys, they're looking at how you perform as special teams. That's like a big thing for NFL scouts, how you perform in special teams, your attitude, your body language, effort, a lot of things like that. They'll tell you about it. So they're going to love that on tape, but he's a big guy, man. That's what the NFL is training to. You go in a big 6'3" plus guy who can move. He's going vertical. He's got a big catch radius. So when you have these quarterbacks all running around trying to make these plays, you don't have to be perfect. That's kind of where that league is training to. So I honestly think he's not even a finished product. I think now people are understanding how good he is and how much work he's put in, but he still has another year to just keep putting it all together. I think he could be a dominant factor for us next year. Like when Jacoby and, X graduate, I think low key, I would circle him in as our number one guy. I would not go and be like, oh my God, we need to get a number one guy out of the portal, because Horton to me is a number one type guy. He's a guy with nothing, even if he's covered, you could still throw it up. And he can come down with it, more oftentimes than not. And plus, he can create separation. So I think he's a number one type guy.
Now, look, I've been following you for a while. I remember reading when we got Gaddis, you were one of the first people to kind of raise some issues about the way he was putting together some of the spacing stuff. And obviously that turned out to be true. So you watched this offense last year, did all these video breakdowns last year, very familiar with what we do on offense. Seeing this game plan and what we did with Cam Ward and all these receivers, all these weapons, Elijah Arroyo back in the mix. What do you see from our offense schematically?
This was definitely more air raid, in my opinion. I felt like, yes, last year we had a good met in some games, especially early on. We had a really good mesh between some power football and a lot of, some air raid concepts. But we went full air raid passing concepts with Cam Ward. I'm just telling you straight up and down. The pre-snap motions were a little different. I love Elijah Arroyo in the backfield, and we using him as the motion man. and it's telling Cam what's going on. There was 2 or 3 plays just by Elijah Arroyo moving out of the backfield. Cam knew where he was going with the football, and it was out quick. So a lot of stuff like that I liked. But obviously the tight ends were being used. Obviously Arroyo being healthy is a big factor. But I don't want to shout out Cam because he did catch that touchdown. It was a great play. So we did not run that last year. We had a couple times where we had the tight end going on a mesh, but it was the delayed mesh. He's blocking. He goes from DN to the blitzer, and then he releases. It's man coverage. So he was blocking enough to make his man think he was, free to just stare at the quarterback. And as he's continuing to stare at the quarterback, number 2, now here comes 84. You want to joke about him? He's grandpa, all that. He's coming wide open. He's coming wide open. And here he goes. So that's something in the offense, tight ends use more, but way more pass, air raid passing concepts. There was a play where, Cam Ward was extending, and then he ended up hitting Horton. That was going to be a touchdown play if UF didn't get some penetration from the inside, because really what we were doing was we had Arroyo coming the flat, Jacoby George doing a post curl, and what we were doing is we were trying to get everybody this way. We had Ray Joseph, which is in my opinion the perfect personnel to run this route because he has to be super fast for this route to work. He's running like a fake in, like a crosser, and he just breaks off and runs to the corner. He was so wide open. It was going to be Cam running this way, turn around, and throw a touchdown. If Florida didn't blow up the play in the backfield, it would have been a touchdown. But still, Cam was able to run outside and then throw a sidearm ball 20 yards this way to Horton. Like, it was crazy. But that's something that we've seen. The passing concepts are definitely more, air raid. I feel like the trust is all in with Cam Ward. I mean, you got to give the guy the options to do what he does and pick his spots. And then the personnel, just to say, like, we have fast receivers, and I love X. He's the best one on the team, but that's not the right route for X. He's not going to be able to get to that spot where you want him to. That's a route for Sam Brown or Ray Joseph. So I like the personnel decision for that because that's the guy who's going to run under it and just, meet that ball at the back pylon. So stuff like that, really more explosive passing concepts and the spacing, just a lot better. But you could tell it's just the confidence of your quarterback is letting, Coach Shannon Dawson just throw it all out there. This is more like what we saw at Houston. And the running game at Houston wasn't bad. It's just what didn't have these type of offensive linemen.
And we're going to get into the offensive linemen. I know you watch the trenches, but one thing I want to get to real quick that you said, just because I want to bring listeners into the game, behind the game, and explain it to them. You mentioned how Elijah Arroyo motioning out the backfield gets the defense to kind of show his hand a little bit and allow Cam Ward to figure out where he wants to throw. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? So
there's basically we ran a lot of trip sets. So we'll have 2 receivers over here, and we'll have Elijah Arroyo either in the backfield or at H-back. He's motioning out, right? He'll motion out, so it'll be a true trips. So if a defender follows him, it's man coverage, right? So if they just shift and realign themselves, most likely it's a zone. So what's going on is we had 2 plays where one for certain, we moved Arroyo to the slot. Guy came over. Immediately, this pass is going to X. Immediate. And also one of the big ones, the one that X had that guy injure himself, feel bad for him. I laugh at him, but I understand the pain that's gonna come as a player for rehabbing and missing the whole season and stuff. So I feel bad for him. But
did he tear his ACL? I didn't even know that.
I think it is. Ugh. I think it is. So I feel bad for him, but it just sucks that it happened that way. But that play, Arroyo motions out, lets Cam Ward knows it's man. So here comes Sam Brown doing an inside seam. That's something we did not have last year. Not too much stems on our route. Here comes Brown. He's taking an inside stem, going straight up, just so X could be right around him, and he goes in. So now that defender has to go around all that traffic, and by the time he gets around that, X is already coming back inside. That's how he was so open. But Cam Ward knew exactly where he was going with that football because of some pre-snap motion. All right, they're in man. We have a man beater call on this left side. I know X is going to be open. And then, he did some more stuff after the catch. It was going to get drafted. But that type of stuff, big time, so much pre-snap motion. Even, the touchdown run to Mark Fletcher, we send an Arroyo this way just for Sam Brown to come around a wham block and lead the way. So much more misdirection, a lot more pre-snap motion, challenging the defense with their alignments, making sure that they're in the right spot, every time we adjust pre-snap. So I love it. I think it's a big part of the offense.
Now, look, even though you you live on the outside, right? You're a receivers guy. I know when you rewatch these games and breaking down on your channel, you focus a lot on the trenches as well. What did you see when you rewatched closely and looked at the trenches?
Welcome, Ryan Rodriguez. We were very excited about you when you first came in. A lot of Canes fans forgot how we were calling him the center of the future. Coming out of Columbus, he was a nasty guy. He really was. Everybody was, we was really hyping him in high school. He had a couple injuries, but welcome to it. Started at left guard, out at left guard. Him and McCoy got in there, played well. Man, the trenches were just so good, but just on offensive line, Jalen Rivers is a top 3 tackle in my opinion. He was not stressed at all. I thought Florida tried to do a lot of things to make him pick and choose, and he always made sure he stayed, with his integrity. And then that let Cam Ward really like shine, because anytime you saw Cam Ward making these plays, where were they going? It was to the left. Saw that big play to Restrepo where he jumped back. He was rolling out to the left. That play where he was, Jacoby George, he's going out to the left. You got to understand, a lot of these times he's extending these plays. He's going to the left side, and it's not by accident, bro. It's because Jalen Rivers is doing his job at a very, very, very high level. So I have all the respect in the world. His family was up there with us in the nosebleeds. They're great people. So, yeah, I think if you really watch that game again and you watch 64, you understand that there was 3-4 guys that they're throwing at him, and they could not get anything on him. I don't think he even allowed a pressure, to be honest with you.
Now, look, you got the full video with the breakdowns and the actual plays on your channel. But before we let you go, give us one more nugget of just something that you picked out watching this game.
A good one. I think it's safe to say that the cornerback room is going to be a strength on this team. To be honest with you, I know it was a question mark and this what the safety bring, but I think if anybody saw this game and saw what they try to do to Damari 2 or 3 times, and if they're begging for flags, no, that's called elite positioning. This is why we get a big corner. He's 195 pounds. He has the right to be here. Can you run through him? The answer was no on Saturday. So that's one of my big takeaways with that. The cornerback room is going to be very, special moving forward. And it's because of guys like Damari and Jadias and obviously OJ, who started and had 28 plus snaps, gave up 0, catches and whatever the case may be. But that's a good thing right there. I think the cornerback room, did a lot. Daryl Porter, they called a horrible pass interference on him when the guy was pushing him, and they called it on Daryl. But yeah, the cornerback room is here to stay. I'm very excited. I think we are 5 deep. I saw De'Ani Hill get in. I didn't see him in practice because he was hurt. I saw him get in. Man, he looked good. He had good eyes. When he was sitting in zone, he had great eyes. He was plastering. I like when guys are hands on. Okay, I'm not deep, but hands on, making sure my safety has all the time in the world to handle what he has to handle and still be over the top of me. So again, I love the corner room. That's probably something that most fans probably were a little worried about, but they took 4 or 5 deep shots on us, man. And every single time you could not see a corner that was not in position. They were either on top of the route impeding and not letting the receiver get there, or the ball was just way overthrown and, the quarterback knew not to try it.
Yeah, to do it early, I think set the tone and really allowed Miami to take the crowd out of the game and get that early lead and kind of put this one away. So, hey, Stevo, always appreciate you. We can find you on the channel 365 Canes Info. Everybody check that out. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also catch him on this channel on Wednesday with the Canes Legacy crew. Everybody does a great job. I know they're going to be having fun next time they suit up. So again, Stevo, man, Nostradamus, you called it. I'll keep coming to you for the Broward touchdowns. I'm sure we'll get some more guys getting in there. Maybe a Jordan Lyle.
We could have had another one. We could have had a Broward passing touchdown too, but we'll talk about that another time. I'm in a good mood.
FAMU, I'm keeping my eye on Jordan Lyle and Chris Johnson against FAMU. So we'll see how that one goes.
You've seen Jordan Lyle with 2 or 3 pass pro snaps that really blew my mind. And I was like, oh, I wonder why he's getting carries early.
That's it, man. He was ready to go. But it's gonna be fun on Saturday.
In the teeth. Okay, we see you.
That's how you earn the spot. Look, you saw those guys. Look at James White. I mean, a guy like that who can't run as good as Jordan Lyle, at least in high school. Look how long he lasted in the pro just by picking up blocks, good receiving, being smart. That's a big part of the game, man. So you get all that and more on 365 Canes Info. Stevo, man, appreciate you, and let's do this again.
Yeah, anytime, D Money. Appreciate you for having me, fam.